Welcome in. Welcome into Wednesday's version of Off the Hook. I am Caleb Calhoun. I'm actually joined by Caleb Jarreau today. Dave Hooker is off, but we still got a loaded show for you. We're going to have Ron Slay on in the second block. Got a little bit of baseball recap to talk about, last night's basketball game, and some football recruiting news and a football staff update. Again, I'm Caleb Calhoun. Caleb Jarreau, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Today's show is brought to you by Zool Beer. They got great parking downtown. Portions of the program, brought to you by Zool Beer. Go to xulbeer.com. That's xulbeer.com. Thank you all for being with us. Please hit that like and subscribe button when you get the chance. Travis, welcome on board. Travis has already said that this basketball team takes him on a roller coaster of emotion. Travis, I couldn't agree with you more. We'll have a lot more on that in the second hour with Ron Slay. We want to talk a little bit, though, to start off with a little bit of serious news, which is the Alabama scandal that I just don't think we could avoid and ignore. As you guys know, there was the Darius Miles incident. I guess it was a month ago now, right, Caleb?
That sounds about right. Like right after Christmas break, I think.
Yeah. So Darius Miles, as we all know, right after Christmas break, was charged with murder. Well, it sounds like the Tuscaloosa police testified last night that Brandon Miller, Alabama's best player, supplied him the gun that was the murder weapon. Now, I want to be clear. I want to be fair on this before we go any further. That was not Brandon Miller's gun. It wasn't like he illegally gave Darius Miles the gun. It sounds like, from what I've read, and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Darius Miles' gun that was given to Brandon Miller, that was given back to Darius Miles, which probably helps his case a little bit more. But this was all swept under the rug. Doesn't sound like any charges are going to come out. And Nate Oats comes out yesterday and says, wrong place, wrong time. That was the words he used to describe Brandon Miller. And as we all know, it's a lot different when Brandon Miller is going to get in trouble versus Darius Miles. So, Jarreau, what are your thoughts on all of this?
I mean, Nate Oats said they knew about it. So my first thought was, why did you not have something planned to say that was better than wrong spot, wrong time, or he's not in any trouble at all? Because like a lot of people have said, like even if he's not in legal trouble or trouble with the team, like morally there's something wrong there, and you have to be in trouble with somebody, whether it's I don't. My first thought from like a PR standpoint was, why did Nate Oats not have something better to say? Because you're dealing with an active case, and I mean, somebody lost their life, and Brandon Miller was close enough to the scene where his car had gunshot holes in it. So obviously he was there and involved in some way, whether he's charged or not. So I think you should have something better planned to say.
Yeah, that's the crazy part is he was clearly, it's funny. The Tuscaloosa police are saying they're not going to charge him. There's not enough there. But I'm like, are we not going? Was there no investigation into Brandon Miller whatsoever? I mean, he supplied the murder weapon, even if it wasn't his. He handed the murder weapon to Darius Miles. That was testified by the police. You're right. Clearly, his car was at the scene in some way. Nate Oats shielded everybody from this. He didn't let anybody know about this issue. So this is a really, 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 really bad look for Nate Oats in Alabama. And quite honestly, I want to tie it to Tennessee real quick, because you've wondered, Jarreau, are there other skeletons in Nate Oats' closet, and how far back do they go? And did Danny White know about any of them? Because as we know, Danny White was the one who found Nate Oats when he was athletic director at Buffalo, current Tennessee athletic director.
Yeah, I also feel like Tennessee would have handled this a lot better just from a PR standpoint, because obviously it's going to come out, so it's bad press. Like it's going to happen, it's inevitable. But I feel like Tennessee would have had something planned, because even when you think of like Tennessee with the McCullough issue, there was always something planned to say like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen, or they made sure that everybody knew the process that was going on with him, and there was never any questions about where he was in the legal process. He went through the investigation with Tennessee, and whatever your thoughts are on that situation, he came out as innocent or not guilty through the Tennessee system. So then he was cleared to play. So obviously Danny White had better protocols in place for that situation. And I feel like if he was in this place, he would also have better protocols, or at least a protocol, because I feel like they just kind of are winging it, it feels like. Because wrong spot, wrong time. As soon as he said that, Alabama was trending on Twitter instantly.
Correct. It's funny because I think you're right. Tennessee, for better or for worse, has not a scandal of this level, but probably just has enough experience dealing with scandals and fallouts from them over the past 10 years that they would handle it. I mean, we're talking about a school that unfortunately did have a sexual assault lawsuit 7 years ago. That was a really bad one. And then, off-field non-violent scandals, but pay for play, academic fraud with Donnie Tyndall, just all the way across the board. So given all of that, I want to get to today's tough question. And I guess my question starting off would be, should Nate Oats be fired over this?
I think if you're Alabama's president, you're looking at the athletic director. Because in reality, I don't like Nate Oats is the one that obviously said wrong spot, wrong time. But punishment for scandals or anything like that, I feel like comes from above Nate Oats. Like that's on the athletic director and the administration to handle that and obviously handle the fallout from it and stuff like that. So if I'm Alabama's president or chancellor, whoever their head of university is, I'm looking at the athletic director like, how did you let this happen? Because at the end of the day, while it's Nate Oats whose video is trending on Twitter, it's the athletic director who is in charge of what he says and what he does. So I'm curious to see what happens to the whole administration or whoever is supposed to be keeping Nate Oats in check and that basketball team.
So do you think there's a possibility that this went above Nate Oats to a degree that he was almost forced to keep quiet about it?
I mean, I feel like, obviously, if you look at Alabama's season, they want Brandon Miller on the court because without him, they're really, he's averaging 18 points a game. He's insanely good on the floor. So it makes you wonder because I feel like Nate Oats, because even when it happened, I remember they took a day off and Nate Oats was talking about he was sorry for the team or sorry for the family and his team was kind of in disarray and they were praying for the family. So I really do feel like it's not 100% on Nate Oats because they knew about it. If this was something that got brought, if this dropped today and he had no idea that Brandon Miller was at the scene, then maybe you can cut Nate Oats some slack, but they knew about it. So obviously the athletic department had talked about this in some way.
Yep, I kind of agree. So let's talk a little bit about where this goes from here, because on a much lighter level, we're going to talk about Tennessee basketball in the second block, and there's a lot to criticize there. But it seems like Tennessee basketball has been in the thick of the SEC race over the past 5-6 years since Rick Barnes has been around. And the biggest threats to them keep having scandals. I mean, this is a big one. This is beyond just your basketball scandal. But before Nate Oats, you had Will Wade at LSU really standing in their way for a while. You've had Bruce Pearl standing in their way for a while. Do you think there is kind of an advantage for Tennessee just on the idea that whatever else you want to say about Barnes, and again, I want to insist, we're going to say a lot about him in the second block, that at least they're running a clean program and at least none of this is happening?
Yeah, and I think that's a testament to just Danny White and Tennessee's athletic department as a whole. Because Danny White came in fresh off of the Jeremy Pruitt, I think it ended up being Chick-fil-A bags that they were handing out, not McDonald's bags. But Danny White came in fresh off of that scandal, and he's kept this athletic program, even keeled. You haven't had any ups and downs or scandals or any major headlines. So I really think that's a testament to him. And Rick Barnes as a coach was never somebody who had off the court issues. He was always a guy who would get the job. He's a good person, a good basketball coach. And he had, I don't think correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he had any issues at Texas either when he was there for a while. And he hasn't had any off the court. I keep wanting to say off the court issues while he was at Tennessee. So, it is a testament to just the program they're running. Obviously on the court, one night they shoot 30%, one night they shoot 60%, but you don't have to worry about any of the players providing murder weapons to anybody, knock on wood. And especially at Tennessee, I remember it was talked about the Christmas break is one of the longest of any university in America. It's 7 or 8 weeks because they have the winter mini-term classes. So it's always a worry when you get out of school, like, all right, we just cut loose a roster of, 40, 50 college students who are football players, and their actions reflect our university. So obviously we saw what happened at Alabama. Bad stuff happens. And Nate Oates said, like, as a coach, you can't watch what your players are doing when they're not in front of you. So when you go home on Christmas break, you just hope nothing goes wrong, and you hope that your players kind of represent your university in a good way. And we saw Tennessee, they came back from I want to say 7 or 8 weeks, came back from that break, and there was nothing had happened. Like, nothing made national news or anything like that. So compared to Alabama, Tennessee's athletic department has obviously held their athletes to a higher standard, and they haven't let any scandals or anything, at least in Danny White's time, take over headlines and take away from the fact that their football program is on the rise or anything like that.
Yep. There was one issue with Rick Barnes, but I don't think it was anything serious. There was an investigation into some secondary violation in Texas that happened after he had joined Tennessee. But okay, secondary violations happen all over the country.
Tennessee has, they just released that Tennessee had like 3 or 4 of those little violations that you just self-report, and the NCAA slaps you on the wrist and says, all right, don't do it again.
Right. Portions of the program brought to you by Craft Treats. Craft Treats can take care of your pet with their chill pills, CBD in there for digestive issues. Also, they can take care of arthritis and anxiety. I've got a young dog, but he definitely still has anxiety, and he definitely could use some chill pills. So Craft Treats, we thank them for their sponsorship. Moving on to baseball, actually, and there's a bit of a transition here where we talk about how the NCAA is dealing with things. Tennessee's wrapped up what you might call its first week of baseball after they won their home opener in the middle of this week. They won 1 of 3 over the weekend, so they're 2-2 now. They're still waiting, though, from the NCAA on this Maui Ahuna case. I pronounced that right, didn't I?
Yeah.
And Jarreau, why don't you enlighten us a little bit about this? What's going on with this situation?
Well, really, nobody knows. So, obviously, Ahuna's family flew into Phoenix from Hawaii, and the team got there. And about 24 hours before the game, he was informed he was ineligible. And it kind of caught Ahuna by surprise, but Vitello kind of hinted that, like, hey, the coaches kind of like heard rumblings of this already. And so it really makes you wonder. Obviously, when Ahuna was recruited, Tennessee reported a recruiting violation that they paid for a plane before he got to Knoxville. And there's basically they gave him a flight a week early or something like that. But it's not related to that, is what we've been told. It's something else. And Vitello said we'll learn about more whenever he gets cleared. And he keeps saying like very cryptic stuff, like more will come to light, or there's more important people than me working on it. So I don't know when he'll be cleared. I don't think anybody knows when he'll be cleared. Hopefully it's soon for the sake of him, his family, and Tennessee baseball. But Vitello said yesterday he's handling it like a champ. He's still putting out extra work. He's living in the cages, living on the field, and he's supporting now starting shortstop Austin Jaslove. So hopefully he gets cleared soon for everybody's sake. But really, I have no idea what is happening or what the NCAA is looking at.
Can I be honest and say there's something suspicious about Tony Vitello not going nuclear on the NCAA on this? Because I'm going to be honest, having covered a few of these in the past, Uros Plavchik, Aubrey Solomon when he transferred to Tennessee, Cade Mays when he transferred to Tennessee,
Brew
McCoy. Yeah, but I think Brew McCoy was given eligibility, wasn't he? There was no he can't.
Yeah, but it was in question for I think a month.
Okay.
Or his eligibility came late, because usually with transfers, like even the transfers that just came into Tennessee, they're eligible immediately. Like there's no question about it. And Brew McCoy had some questions, which in the past would obviously not be abnormal, but now, like Ahuna being ineligible, but Tennessee's third baseman who came from Alabama is eligible. So obviously something is going on where the 2 or 3 other transfers are good, but Ahuna isn't. And why isn't Ahuna? He's your top guy, and the NCAA is seemingly holding him back.
Yeah, see, that's where I was going. Is there something weird about that? Because I might even have to side with the NCAA, because when it was with Cade Mays, which got into the season, or Uros Plavchik, which got into the season, you saw the whole Tennessee administration go nuclear on the NCAA. They were led by Philip Fulmer at the time, and they just went off on just how awful and unjust and unfair it is. We know Tony Vitello is not one to really hide his brashness. I mean, that's the whole program he's built at Tennessee. So for him to be so classy in his response to say, we'll make the best of it and not really be critical of the NCAA. Jarreau, I got to say that leads me to believe that Tennessee did something, I don't want to say illegal, but didn't dot their I's and cross their T's when they were trying to get him to Knoxville.
And I mean, that could be the case, or it even could be just like maybe a paper got lost. So you talk about like he's been there since August, so we assume his class is transferred. But like, if he transferred like 5 hours instead of 6 hours, or maybe a transcript got lost in the mail or something, it could be something like that. So I am surprised they haven't. Obviously, fans have criticized the NCAA, but Vitello has kind of steered away from that. And I'm not 100% sure because he hasn't really said what else it could be either. But I do kind of agree it is suspicious. But he says he keeps saying like everything's going to come to light, or we'll all find out in the end and stuff like that, which is kind of like very suspicious or auspicious of what's going to come out. And really, who knows? But I do know that they could really use his bat in this lineup. And for his sake, I know he wants to get on the field. So hopefully he's cleared pronto.
Yeah, speaking of that bat, Tennessee started the year 0-2 in that series last week, and they won the last game against UC San Diego after losing to Arizona and Grand Canyon. Beat Alabama A&M Tuesday night. It seems like the experience is outweighing the hype right now, and what I mean by that is the pitching had all the experience and the proven production, and the pitching has been fine. Offense, the bats have not been there yet. They lost 3-1 to Arizona, 4-3 to Grand Canyon, and then they shut out UC San Diego and Alabama A&M. Jarreau, how much of a concern is this? I mean, it doesn't seem like the bats are there yet.
Yeah, and really, it's not that big of a concern, I would say. It's February, so obviously, even if this team had young pitching and young hitters, you would expect your pitching to be ahead of your bats because – obviously these guys have faced their teammates, but you face your teammates so many times it kind of gets redundant. And they all know what Chase Dolander throws. They watched him for a season, so facing him in practice obviously isn't a surprise to any of them. So bats always come last in baseball, and so I'm not really worried about the offense. And really, what killed them this weekend is they got on base, they just couldn't score. So against Arizona, they had 4 guys. With 4 innings where the leadoff hitter got on base, and none of them scored. And then against Grand Canyon, they had 4 guys with 4 innings where the leadoff guys got on base, none of them scored. And then UC San Diego, they had 4 leadoff guys get on base, 2 scored. And then you look at last night against Alabama A&M, and they'll play Alabama A&M again tonight. Obviously, it's a midweek opponent, but still, they had 5 leadoff hitters get on, and they scored them 3 times. So whenever you get that leadoff guy on, they have to try to get him in. And you can't leave runners on base. And you really have to get production out of the bottom half of this lineup. Because when you get to that 7, 8, 9, I think on the weekend they hit like 190 or 200, 7, 8, 9. Which, if you're giving the other pitcher a free inning, that's 1 more inning. The starting pitcher's in the game. You're not getting him out. That's 1 inning. You're not scoring runs. So I really think the bats will be all right and they'll come around. It's just they have to score guys when they get on. And then another thing is this team will never be last year's team. So I feel like that's also going against them. They started 1-2 on the weekend. They were the only SEC team with a losing record, and everybody's kind of freaking out because last year's team only had 7 or 9 losses, and this year's team is just not be last year's team. There won't be another team like last year's Tennessee baseball team. So I feel like if we lower our expectations a little bit, this team will do just fine.
Yeah, and honestly, given the way I don't know if you saw my rant last week, given the way the structure of the NCAA baseball tournament works, if you struggle early because you're throwing guys together, it really doesn't matter because it's the most random crapshoot selection over who wins the the College World Series. And
I was wondering when you started talking about how Vitello wasn't dissing the NCAA, the baseball tournament is one of the ones where the NCAA has a big hand. Because when you think about it, like if they have a Mississippi State who's teetering on a regional host or like Old Dominion, they'll always lean Mississippi State because they can make more money. And you don't see that. Like in football, we saw TCU make the playoff. It didn't matter how big or small the school was or how much money they brought in. Like you can't argue with the playoff committee. But in the NCAA, and March Madness is kind of the same too, they kind of sway towards the blue bloods or they sway towards where they're going to make more money. And so I wonder if Vitello is kind of avoiding dissing the NCAA because he's worried that if he like comes out and talks about how bad the NCAA is treating Ahuna, which obviously we don't know for sure, but I would think the NCAA is doing him pretty dirty, that they might hurt him in the end with seeding. So, and I mean, we saw them do it with Will Wade. Like that LSU team won the SEC regular championship and then was probably 2 seeds below where everybody projected. And you kind of have to wonder. Obviously, nobody came out and said it, but you wonder, like, okay, is it because they don't want Will Wade to have this high seed and kind of like have a pedestal in college baseball? Do they not want this Tennessee team with Vitello coming out and saying the NCAA is hurting one of their players? They probably don't want him as the number 1 seed again.
Yep. When we come back, we're going to take a quick 3-minute break. When we come back, we should have Ryan Slay on. We're going to be able to talk a little bit of Tennessee basketball. The slide continues for that program after last night's game. Stick with us. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
Family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Inflation has risen to the highest level in over 40 years, according to the April 2022 U.S. Inflation Calculator. Will your investments provide you the income you need in retirement? Are you losing purchasing power of your savings due to inflation? Simply stated, if the cost of goods and services are 8% higher and you're only earning 4% in your investments, that money buys you less of what you need. Right now is the time to act. Call Guardian Investment Advisors today.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here. I want to personally invite you to North Knoxville's newest sports bar and restaurant.
It's Big Orange Phillies, located in Black Oak Center. And yes folks, it's happening in Halls. Big Orange Phillies offers family-friendly environment with homemade meals and the best deli-style subs around. Billiards, darts, jukebox, shuffleboard, and cornhole, and a full bar. We also offer valet parking on weekends and during special events. We even have a covered back patio. It's happening at Big Orange Phillies. We want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finalists for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassy Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassy, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassy's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassy Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Welcome back to the program. Tennessee basketball last night lost to Texas A&M 68-63. We should have Ron Slade on soon to talk about it. Before we get to him, though, Jarreau, what were your thoughts on last night's game?
This team is very inconsistent, were my thoughts on last night. I also think that, blame the referees all you want. Texas A&M is a team that gets to the free throw line, and you fouled them 24 times, which that's not a recipe for success right there.
Nope, not at all. Someone who could help us a little more with this, bringing him on now. Ron Slay. Program is brought to you by Ron Slay's appearance is brought to you by Vassy Lawn and Garden. Man alive, it's worth the drive. Vassy Lawn and Garden. Ron, hanging out at the Charlotte airport, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Welcome, Ron. Thanks for doing this without Dave Hooker today.
No doubt. No doubt.
You got the two Calebs, and Jarreau gets to get his revenge on you after you boxed him out a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Hey, it's all good. I'm willing and able to get another box out going if you want to.
Well, where you headed?
Going back to Nashville, man. I was coming from Fayetteville, Arkansas, doing the game last night. Arkansas and Georgia. So connection flights, man. Now I know why I travel early in the morning or late at night, because this airport is packed, man. I ain't dealt with this in a long time. So yeah, I'm in the midst of it right now. You catch me.
I totally understand that. Wanted to dive in with last night's Texas A&M game. I know you were having to cover another one, so I don't know how much of it you were able to see, but it seemed like Tennessee was riding the ship, and then the second half they just kind of wilted towards the end. What did you see from that game?
Man, so without being able to go see it in detail, I was watching it actually on my phone while, trying to call that game. Don't tell the SEC network though. But man, it looked like they were in control in the first half. I did get to see quite a bit of that in the first half, but second half, Texas A&M did what they do. They get downhill, create a lot of contact, and put the onus on the referees making the calls. If they don't make the calls, it's a totally different game. If they do, they go to the foul line, and that's why they lead the nation in free throw attempts because they play a certain way. They try to get to the foul line. That is a part of their game, and they need that in order to be who they are. But you got to give credit to guys like Marble. Wade Taylor played very well, but Marble, man, he felt he had his way. That's tough to watch, knowing that your depth that you have is in the front court, and you're missing it on the guard. So if someone was to go crazy on the wing or something of that nature, you'd understand with Josiah and Julian Phillips being out. But with big bodies like Urosh and all these guys, man, Marble wasn't supposed to be able to have that type of performance.
Yesterday, Dave and I were talking a little bit, and this was a radical thought, but after last night seeing Zakai play 34 minutes, Olivier played 35, and Santi played 36. Look, I think Tennessee's in the NCAA tournament no matter what. We saw last year the SEC tournament doesn't matter unless you win it. That's what they've made very clear in the NCAA. Do you think Tennessee basketball should maybe consider getting ahead of the curve and start load management for college basketball so they can be fresher for the NCAA tournament with no title on the table?
I mean, I don't see why not. You know what I'm saying? With these last couple of games coming, and even if it were, this game Saturday versus South Carolina, which with short rotation, you should be able to. With rotation, you should be able to win against South Carolina. But it depends how you feel. Like, do you want to get guys back acclimated to the team and acclimated to playing with Josiah and with Julian Phillips? But I'm if you're 80%, I'm with you. You all go. You go out there and you play as hard as you can and you let the chips fall where they're made. But with this Tennessee team, if they're not healthy and whole, they don't have a shot. They're playing against the big dogs and the teams that are really, really hungry in tournaments. No shot. No shut out.
Yeah, Ron. And you talk about Marble having, he had finished with 21 points and 9 boards. And you're right. Like with Tennessee's big men, you lose depth in the front court, but you think that you're going to have your big men there to play defense. And Urosh only played 3 minutes last night. And obviously Meshack put in 30. But what do you think about the state of like Tennessee's bigs? And because it feels like Urosh is a guy who is supposed to have a super big role this season, but he kind of hasn't filled that role as much.
Yeah, man, you're starting to rely on Tobe and Big A do a lot more, Olivier as well. But you would love to have a big body, a 7-footer like Urosh to be able to get in there and bang around. I mean, that's what his identity was, an enforcer. And nothing was enforced yesterday in that paint. And they just did what they wanted to do. So it's I wonder what took place. I know he got in and did something in the first half. I can't remember exactly what it was when he subbed in for Adu, but he got taken out really quickly, and Adu was put back in even with having 2 fouls. So he I don't know if he's in the doghouse or what, but whatever it is, going forward, he needs to get it together in practice so he can earn his minutes back because they're going to need him. You're going to need all able bodies. You know, with Tennessee, that's not a team that can play and win going 6, 7 deep. They got to go 9 deep, you know, because of the way the rotation and the way they're expected to play on the defensive end. And if you're missing one of them bodies, it's not good. It may be okay for one game, but to make a deep run, it won't work.
What's wrong with Tyreek Key? It's just I thought he was going to be such a good, reliable player for Tennessee and SEC play, and it's just collapsed for him. Is it in his head, or do you just think he wasn't cut out for SEC play?
Man, I'm not sure what it was, man. And I can't say he's not cut out for SEC play because watching him and the way he prepares and seeing him in the preseason leading up to the season, he's playing against some of the toughest defenders he's going to see, regardless of his SEC, ACC, whatever it may be. The guys he goes against in practice, they've seen it and they play pressure defense. So if you can score on them, and I saw him have his way with guys before, post-ups, shooting on the wing. We seen Gonzaga. We saw it in flashes throughout the season. It's just not something, man, that just leaves you when you can score the ball the way he does. You know, so I don't know if it's something in his head or is he thinking too much. A couple of times in the second half, you saw him take some shots, you know, and you were like, okay, even though you're missing it, it's good that you're being aggressive. And maybe it's just a build-up. And maybe it'll be just a build-up and all come to a head once you get into the tournament play, and maybe he gets it back. But one thing about it, man, they were going to rely on him. Us as fans of the game, we're going to rely on him because you heard so much good about him, and it's just not coming through. It's just not coming through. Players go through that sometimes. I hate to say it's in their head and things like that because it'd be different if the coach was telling you not to shoot. Then I understand how it can be in your head, but he's actually telling these guys shoot the ball. So I'm not sure what it is, man. I'm not sure what it is, but he got to get in that gym, watch film, understand what he can do, and go and do it. I mean, you just got to at some point be like, man, the season is right here about to end, and you go all out. You don't have a year to come back.
You know, Ron, I want to transition for a second. I guess it was a week or two ago now that you posted a video on Twitter talking about how good the first-year head coaches are for the SEC. And obviously last night you were watching Georgia and Mike White, which he isn't a first-year head coach, but it's his first year at Georgia. Can you kind of build on that and talk about what first-year head coaches you think will have the most success in this league?
Man, I most definitely think outside of the standings, I think what Mike White is doing, laying this foundation, is really good for Georgia moving forward. They're going to be fine. They're right now, they're undersized a bit. You know, they got really good guard play. They got guys that are kind of mixed with each other. Justin Hill is a really good point guard, but he's a little held back in a sense because he doesn't want to be assertive and step on page with a Quendo and Terry Roberts with him just coming in. So I like what Mike White is doing. He has a plan, and I do believe him being in this league before will help. So he'll be able to execute that. But Dennis Gates is a guy, man. You got to take your hat off to him. He brought a different type of culture. Him coming from the Atlanta Hamilton tree, you can see all it's going to take is about 2 or 3 years because all those class recruits that were going to the league at Florida State, him and his assistant coach were those were the guys behind the madness of getting Atlanta Hamilton and all those players. So he brought him with him. So you can see it's starting to change in Como, and he's going to have some good things going. Todd Golden, I expect some good things with him. More of an analytic guy. So he's got to get his type of guys in there. You give him a mulligan, most definitely would have been the first year, and also the Cowboys would have been hurt down the stretch. But he'll be fine. Lamont Paris will be fine as well. It's just kind of hard to recruit in South Carolina right now. You know, it's always been a place that, even in my era, they would get guys, but they wouldn't hold them that long. You know, it was either guys that would develop into their 3rd or 4th year and be like, oh, they got a really good team. Then there'd be a drop off, and then they have to develop them again. Just something about South Carolina. I feel like I'm leaving somebody. Coach Jones is pretty good in Mississippi State. We got those guys down there. Who else is it? Who am I missing? This is somebody else. Can't think right now, but yeah, man, I like where it's headed. I love the coaches. I pray that Kermit can get it together down there at Ole Miss. If not, somebody may be knocking on his door soon, and we may see a new head coach down there.
Ron, before we let you out of here, we got one last question. So Dave and I were trying to break down like the best, because I'm sure you saw Grant Williams was named VP of the NBA Players Association the other day, and Dave and I were trying to break down, we were trying to do an all-time starting lineup since 1990 for Tennessee basketball. And the problem is you and Grant Williams play the same position. But then I said, I think you could move to center. And what do you think about that? Could you play center in the all-time starting lineup for Tennessee?
I most definitely could. I wouldn't have a problem doing it. I would say if you were to put me and Grant on the court, and I tell Grant this himself, the way Grant and them played, they played with 4 guys around the perimeter, with shooters all around. I played when there was 6 guys in the paint. Good double teams and triple teams, and still was able to score and lead the league in scoring. I mean, back-to-back SEC Player of the Year is pretty good. But just saying, I ain't have the mob he had my senior year. But I love Grant, man, and I would gladly move to the 5 to play. Because you gotta understand too. I'm running around the 255 when I was in college too, just was able to move. So I hold my weight down there. I'm definitely not gonna get pushed around. Some footers might have a little struggle with, but one thing about it, they gotta run down to the other end, and they gonna have a problem. So, yeah, man, I like it. I like moving Grant back there in the second.
Yeah, it'd be the best inside game in the SEC by far.
Most definitely. They can't double team because I'm gonna stretch the floor for it.
No, that's true. You will. You were a very good 3-point shooter. I do remember that about you.
Yeah, I pulled out of that thing.
Yeah. Ron, thanks a lot. Get home safely. Have a blast in Nashville. Maybe pour a cold one just to relax. I know it's been a stressful type of time for you.
Most definitely, man. I appreciate you guys, man. Bye Nation. We're gonna get it together too, y'all. Just gotta get home. Gotta get home and healthy. You guys on the prize, baby.
All right, Ron. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
See you, Ron.
Yep.
Ron Slay brought to you again by Vassy Lawn and Garden. Man alive, it's worth the drive. Vassy Lawn and Garden. When we return, we actually do have to talk a little bit of Tennessee football staff member, and I'm not going to waste a chance to talk a little bit of recruiting when Caleb Jarreau is on. So we'll be back. Stay with us. 2 minutes.
Sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassy Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassy, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassy's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassy Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Hey folks, Gary Viles here, Viles Automotive on Calhoun Drive. I've been selling cars here in East Tennessee for 27 years. In that time, I've come to realize it's not about the car. It's about you, the customer. So I'm here to take care of you just like family. Good credit, bad credit, you name it, we can get you taken care of. If we don't have it, we can find it for you. We go across the country to get any vehicle that you want. And here at Viles Automotive, we don't believe in fake numbers. We just give you great deals. And as always, we want, we need, and we appreciate your business.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air.
Dare to compare.
Chattanooga, we're at it again. For the 5th year in a row, you voted us best of the best criminal and DUI law firm.
And finals for best law firm and best personal injury firm.
Thank you for the love, Chattanooga. We won't let you down.
Our family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Welcome back to the show. I did promise you guys that we are going to get through a little bit of Tennessee football. Calhoun and Caleb Jarreau are still here, but before we do that, Lady Vols face #1 South Carolina tonight. I feel like the hype is just not where it usually is supposed to be for this game, and I feel like that has a lot to do, Jarreau, with the fact that Tennessee's losses to UConn and I believe it was LSU earlier in the year has given off the vibe that I just don't think that they're I think that the apathy is kind of crept in, and I don't know how you get it back. Do you think that does Tennessee have any chance in this game tonight?
I think if Tennessee shoots the ball well, they'll have a shot tomorrow night against South Carolina. And really, South Carolina has not had to win games where they have to shoot beyond the arc. So they're usually a team that can pound you in the paint and play good defense. And I mean, they'll hit twos, but if you're knocking down threes like Tennessee was the other night against Auburn, then I think they'll have a really good shot at beating South Carolina. And when you look at the strength of schedule and the net rankings, while it doesn't feel like they've done good against ranked teams and they haven't beaten a ranked team, they sit at number 15 in the net. And if they have a good performance against South Carolina on Thursday, obviously take care of business at Kentucky and then maybe make a run in the SEC tournament, we could see Thompson Bowling Arena being a host site for the women's NCAA tournament and Tennessee not really having the season that we're used to out of the Lady Vols basketball program. So I think they have a shot. They'll be on their home floor. I'm sure it'll be packed. I mean, 9,000 fans showed up for a Sunday noon game against Auburn, so I'm sure they'll have fans Thursday night. And hopefully they put out a good performance, and then we can see Thompson Bowling Arena be a host, which is something that's been kind of a consistent thing in women's college basketball.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of for Lady Vols, that's the baseline, is that they should be hosting the first weekend of NCAA tournament games. And
it's crazy that, that program has such high expectations, and which I think there's a shot. And if not, I don't think anybody will want to face that Tennessee team as a 6th seed, because they kind of had the same problem as the men's team does. When they're on, they're borderline unbeatable. It's just a matter of if they're on.
Portions of the program brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. That's where you need to go if you need to get LASIK surgery, cataract surgery. They'll take care of you. If you have any trouble with your vision, Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. We're going to transition over to Tennessee football. Got a couple of Tennessee football stories to close out the show. Let's start with Micah James. He has been hired as an off-field assistant for the Vols. Comes from Utah State. Was the O-line coach at Utah State. If you're curious about the connection, Utah State's head coach worked with Josh Heupel. They were co-offensive coordinators back in 2015 there, and he was also a graduate assistant under Josh Heupel in 2018. Jarreau, I get it's a group of 5 to a power 5 jump, but it seems like there's something about the allure of Tennessee that would make you willing to leave an on-field assistant role for an off-field role. What do you think of the move?
Yeah, I think it's a good move. And really, it's not like he's coming into anything foreign. He's familiar with Josh Heupel. He was a grad assistant. And he's really coming home, basically. He played his college football at MTSU. And while he was at MTSU, Glenn Ellerbe was his offensive line coach, who's now the offensive line coach at Tennessee. So none of these coaches that he's coming to Tennessee to work with are unfamiliar to him. He gets to take an analyst role, which has a big impact on recruiting. And even as an analyst, we've seen that position grow in years recently. And we saw the new tight end coach, Alec Albine. He was an analyst, but he played a huge role in the run game. So even as an analyst, I think he can have a big impact at an SEC school. And if he chooses to go to another Power 5 position, maybe as an offensive line coach after this, I wouldn't be surprised if he can make that jump if he's successful at Tennessee.
I mean, heck, you think there's a chance he could even be promoted at Tennessee? I mean, I don't know about line coach because it seems like Glenn Ellerbe is kind of committed there, but Alec Abon down the road, tight ends coach. What do you think the chances are that he could be promoted at Tennessee?
I mean, the chances that any analyst at Tennessee get promoted are pretty high. It seems like Josh Heupel likes to keep it in-house. He's familiar with James from his time at UCF. Ellerby's familiar with James. So if a position comes open, if somebody leaves for a promotion or anything, because I don't think anybody will get fired anytime soon, but obviously promotions come and people leave, come and go from these schools. I wouldn't be surprised if he got promoted at Tennessee because everybody's familiar with him. And if he does good in his analyst role, I don't see the reason why he couldn't take an on-field position or a press box position in a couple of years.
All right, so then what's the next move? All right, so here's a bit of a transition for it. Let's make a prediction. Only on offense, because as we know, Heupel, I think he hasn't had to have any transitions on defense yet. I think he would go a little more national with that because that's not his forte. Who's the next on-field offensive assistant to leave Tennessee or to leave a vacancy?
I mean, could Joey Halzle become a head coach in 2 years? I mean, that would – because he was highly touted to be offensive coordinator at other schools. And as quarterbacks coach, everybody loved him. So is he a guy that might, take like an Alex Golish move, and if a job comes open at a group of 5 school, he goes and becomes their head coach to try to keep moving up the ranks? I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. He's well respected, and obviously Heupel respected him enough to be OC. He's the first name that comes to mind when I think about people who are likely to go. I mean, yeah, I would think Halzle is probably going to be in head coach conversations. If Tennessee continues to succeed on offense, which I don't see why they wouldn't, I could see Halzle moving up pretty soon. What do you think?
So I think Halzle would be. I think if you're Joey Halzle, I think if you're smart, you wait 3 years. And here's why. Next year is kind of a wild card, as you know, because I think Joe Milton's going to start, even if he's not the best player. I think Josh Heupel and they just have a preference for him, and the team has a loyalty to him. But I think you might get a couple offers next year, but you're about to have Nico Iamaleava to coach for 2 years, and I've been insisting this for a while. This is Tim Tebow when you're running the spread. Tim Tebow falling into your lap the way he did with Dan Mullen when Mullen was offensive coordinator at Florida. Whatever offers you get next year, you're going to get 10 times that many offers 2 years later because of the fact that your offenses are going to be – look, I think Tennessee is going to break every college football offensive record known to man once Nico is the quarterback. You could not create in a lab a better quarterback for Josh Heupel's system. So I think if Halzle's smart, he waits 3 years. Next year with Milton, and then coach Nico for 2 years to really build his profile, and he'll be the hottest commodity in coaching in the country at that point. What would you do if you're Halzle?
I would wait. I mean, I don't think he's going to have any, unless problems arise at Tennessee, which I don't think will ever happen. I shouldn't say that. I don't think, it's very unlikely problems will arise with Heupel's coaching staff at Tennessee. I don't see why he wouldn't stay, unless it's for the perfect job. So Alex Golish obviously got a head coaching opportunity at South Florida. That's like the perfect job that he wanted. So he leaves and his family's happy and he's happy. So I think Halzle's in a position to where if the perfect job doesn't arise, he doesn't have to leave. So if he's iffy, on the fence about an offensive coordinator position or a head coaching position, that would be seen as an upward move. I don't know why you leave because you don't have a reason to. Nobody's telling you to leave. You haven't made it at Tennessee. You're making pretty good money. The offense is always, the scheme is going to run itself basically. You have great athletes coming in. Nico's coming in. You're recruiting hot on the recruiting trail. Everything's trending right for Tennessee. So unless that perfect job comes up, why would you leave to go rebuild a little school?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's very much a Kirby Smart under Nick Saban situation. I think Kirby Smart sounds like he waited a while. Well, he had a hard time getting an offer from the place he wanted because everybody knew that was Nick Saban's defense. And he was also waiting for the right offer because, you're right. Why would you leave when you got a sweet gig under Nick Saban? I'm with you. I'm that way with Halzle. I don't think Halzle's going to get the best offers in the world next year, no matter what he does, because people are going to be giving Josh Heupel the credit. I do think in 2 years or 3 years, when he starts setting every record in the book with Nico as his quarterback, it'll be impossible for some schools to deny him at that point. And then you're right. He might get a really, really good job. Maybe at Oklahoma. I think there's a chance Brent Venables is not going to last there. And so, we'll we'll see how that goes. So I'm with you. I think Halsley, if I'm Halsley, I wait for 2 or 3 years. At which point I think Jerry Mack or Kelsey Pope will probably leave before him. Only because I think they might get, I don't think they're going to get a head coaching offer, but I think they might get a offer, like an NFL offer, for instance, that they might take.
I was gonna say that with Kelsey Pope because his predecessor left to go to the Saints, and obviously I don't know what Kelsey Pope's end goal is, but I feel like if an NFL wide receivers coach position came to Kelsey Pope, I wouldn't be surprised if he left.
Correct. I agree. I think that's an upward move. Kelsey Pope is a great coach of wideouts. We know that's what he does, is develop wideouts really, really well. He developed Cedric Tillman. NFL is going for bigger receivers to a certain degree, which is why, just on a random side note, Dave and I think Cedric Tillman is a better NFL prospect than Jalen Hyatt. I don't know what you think, if you agree with us or not, but I think Tillman's better.
I mean, if he's healthy, I feel like Cedric Tillman was probably better at Tennessee when he was at full health in his role. I think he probably could have been better than Jalen Hyatt at Tennessee. But the slot receiver at Tennessee, I mean, you're going to put up big numbers, no doubt. And I feel like for Kelsey Pope, another big thing in the NFL recently has been like players, coaches. So you see like former NFL players becoming coaches because they can relate. And all the wide receivers who talk about Kelsey Pope always talk about how he's a guy they can talk to, and he doesn't seem like he's very disconnected from them as a coach. So that's another reason I feel like he'd fit the NFL and really what the NFL is growing to right now, which is the coaches are there for the players. It's no longer like you have a old head coach who's disconnected and just calling plays.
Before we move on to our final segment, I want to go to the message board just a little bit. I want to send Travis a shout out. He wanted to ask Ron about load management. We did ask Slay about load management. D. Smith asking what's going on at these universities and if UK will make the tournament from the SEC. Jarreau, you think Kentucky makes the tournament?
I think they're one. I talked about it kind of earlier, but I mean, if a school like Kentucky, if they're on the bubble, I think the NCAA will throw them in. Now you look at a school like, I don't know, if Akron or a school like that is on the bubble, then the NCAA probably won't look at them twice. But when you have a blue blood like Kentucky and they're kind of on the bubble, and I mean, Kentucky's been hot down the stretch recently. It's just a matter of for their resume, if their quad one wins, stay quad one. I think Mississippi State is like teetering over 1 and 2 and schools like that. So it's a matter of, for them, really, it's how the other schools do that they've beaten. Obviously, if Tennessee wins a couple games, that would help them.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I agree. I think if they can get Kentucky in the tournament, they're getting him in the tournament. They're putting him in. D. Smith, he wants to know how the O-line is going to match up against OU next year. I don't think Tennessee plays OU next year. I do think that might be a little bit down the road.
I think they were supposed to, but they had to take them off because of the SEC, because they wouldn't do the home and home, if I remember correctly.
Yep, that was because the SEC was trying to move up their move-in date to 2024, which they pulled off. Travis says Oklahoma's going to struggle. I agree with that. And he points out when you win, you lose coaches. Great chance he moves up. All right, Travis is challenging you, Jarreau. He is asking how you could think USF is the perfect job. Okay, I want to say this.
Yeah, you go for it.
I'm going to start with this. Travis, Alex Golesh was born in the Soviet Union, graduated from Ohio State, just coached in Knoxville. If you're from the Soviet Union and you coached in Ohio and you're in the mountains, and then you go to Florida and you see that sunny weather all the time, that's like probably paradise for him down there. So that's why it's the perfect job.
I was going to say, maybe it's just I was thinking about recruiting, but I mean, if you coach anywhere in Florida, like you drive 5 minutes down the road and you can have 4 stars and 3 stars, and probably for USF, I don't think they're getting 5 stars, but recruiting is super easy there. And I think he's 38 or 39. And obviously, if his end goal is to be a head coach, I think USF is the perfect jump job. Because think about it, Lane Kiffin went to Florida Atlantic, another Florida school. Florida's easy to recruit. He had success at Florida Atlantic, and now he's having, if you want to call it, success at Ole Miss. So I could see Alex Golesh kind of taking that same leapfrog, stay at USF 3-4 years if he has success, and then move on to a bigger head coaching job if that's his end goal.
Yeah, and let's not forget this. Before Scott Frost went to USF was the better job than Central Florida for a while. And they actually got into, if for those who don't remember history, in 2005, South Florida got into the old Big East, and then Central Florida had to fight to get into the Conference USA at that time. So it's only within the last decade that Central Florida surpassed them, and that has much more to do with good athletic directors like Danny White and good coaching hires. But don't think for a second that South Florida can't catch Central Florida if they want to. And so they're in a good situation.
And especially in Florida right now, like I don't think USF will compete at an SEC level, but I mean, Florida's struggling, Miami's struggling. So really you're kind of there's a hole almost in Florida where you could kind of fight for these USF recruits to come instead of, what would have been like, if you're like offering a kid in South Florida and it's between Miami or USF or Florida, they're going to Miami. But now they might be thinking twice because you look at Miami and it was kind of a train wreck this past season. I mean, their offensive line was horrible and they just did not play good football.
No, that's true. And Florida's not going to know how to pay them. So, Travis' last point, I think I probably agree with this. He says that Brew is the best NFL type wide receiver Tennessee's had in years. I might agree with that. And
I think Brew is a guy that you could put on the field in the NFL tomorrow, and you would not have to worry about if he gets hurt or if he's not going to catch the ball. Like I always feel like Brew is like very consistent. You know what you're going to get out of him.
Yeah, I agree. And Travis we'll close with Travis saying Golis could have waited 2 to 4 years and ended up at Miami. Yeah, but you never know how things are going to work out. And Golis was a really hot commodity.
That's what I was going to say. Golis kind of like Tennessee, he kind of capitalized on Tennessee's offense being headlines, making national headlines last season. Because if you wait 2 years, you never know what happens. Maybe, like, God forbid, Nico's a bust in 2 years, and now Golis is looked at as, like, killing Tennessee's offense. So you never know what could happen in 2 years.
Correct. All right, we're going to close the show talking a little bit of recruiting with Caleb Jarreau. Dave and I talked about a commitment Monday. We're going to get Jarreau's thoughts, and we're going to talk about a couple other people they're targeting. So let's talk some recruiting.
Talking Cruton.
Am I right or am I right or am I right?
Who's on Tennessee's board? The names you need to know exclusively on Off the Hook Sports with Dave Hooker.
All right, Jarreau. So on Monday, Dave and I were talking. Tennessee got a commitment from Marcus Gorey Jr., in-state guy, this past weekend. I had him as a 3-star, but I know a couple of sites have him as a 4-star. Listed at the scouting report you wrote on him was that sounds like he is proven that he can guard the physical receivers, possession receivers, and tight end, but is a little bit questionable guarding the slot. What are your thoughts on that type of scouting report?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of the harder of the two, I would say, almost. Because, yes, you can't coach speed or agility to a point, but you're getting a guy who is not afraid of the contact. Guarding a bigger wide receiver, like a slot, you're probably backing off of, but a bigger wide receiver, you're pressing them at the line. A tight end, you have to be physical with in coverage, or you're going to end up with a Travis Kelce streaking down the middle of the field. So I feel like having that physical ability, because you can't really teach toughness or wanting that contact. And I feel like when you're recruiting a guy for the SEC, he can't be scared of contact. And I also feel like it's easier to teach, move him, because I feel like he's probably in more of a safety role right now, or more of a cornerback role. And so I feel like it's easier to teach him to become more of a safety. So I think that's a good pickup for Tennessee, and Heupel's emphasis on in-state recruiting continues. And I think he was another guy that in-state you have to keep. Now, if he doesn't pan out in 1 or 2 years and he transfers to a smaller school, that's one thing. But just the fact that they're keeping him in-state from the jump compared to he was getting recruited by, Deion Sanders. And I think both Michigan schools were in there as well. So keeping him in-state was a big emphasis for Josh Heupel, and I feel like that's laying the foundation for this class.
And that says something that, Deion's recruiting everybody, but that both Michigan schools will come for him too.
Yeah. And Deion being a cornerback himself and recruiting Gorey, who is a defensive back, kind of says something too. Because I feel like Deion, while he's just throwing out a ton of offers, with his defensive backs, I feel like he's probably paying a little more attention to who he's recruiting.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And for as athletic as he was, Deion was very big in film study and things like that. So he probably has the nuances. Okay, so let's talk a bit about a couple other things. You wrote yesterday they are in the top 10 for elite athlete DeMello Jones, who sounds like he can play every position on offense plus defensive back. And so,
yes.
coming out of Georgia. What do we know about him?
Basically, so he said, he had 1,500 all-purpose yards, and then you turn around on the defensive end, he had 44 tackles and 7 pass breakups. So, obviously, it's no surprise that he's being highly recruited. If you need any position on the field, just about, you can stick Jones in there. He'd play it very well for you. He seems like a guy that Tennessee's going to have to fight Georgia for. His top 10 was North Carolina, Georgia, Miami, Vandy, Alabama, Kentucky, Ohio State, Notre Dame, South Carolina, and then Tennessee. But Steve Wiltfong of 247 Sports, who is very rarely wrong, projects that he'll end up at Georgia and stay in state. So he's the number 28 prospect out of Georgia. And I don't know. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know if Tennessee is there yet to compete with Georgia for their in-state kids.
I don't think they are, but Tennessee, even at their worst, has always had a decent shot at a couple of good players out of Georgia who just may not be, for whatever reason, don't want to go there. But on principle, you're right. Tennessee is not in a spot to be able to out-recruit Georgia for talent. And I think the thing that hurts Tennessee the most is not just Georgia winning back-to-back national championships, but they put 15 guys in the draft last year. And they're going to put a ton of guys in the draft this year and next year. And Tennessee at their heyday wasn't doing that. I think Tennessee's school record is 11 back in 2001, 2002. So, yeah, I don't think they're at a spot where they can recruit Georgia. Jarreau, I want to be honest with you, and this is something that a lot of Tennessee fans don't want to admit. As long as Kirby Smart is there, as long as Jim Donnan is not there, or one of those 90s coaches between Vince Dooley and Mark Richt, Tennessee's not going to be able to rely on Georgia like it did in the 90s. They're going to have to find other ways because it's just going to be too hard to beat Georgia for such prospects. The thing that works in their favor is I think Georgia Tech is no longer a relevant program. They actually had some relevancy back in the day, but I don't think they will be anytime soon. But yeah, I think Tennessee's going to have to use NIL, creativity, and kind of go a little more national than they might even want to, because I just don't think that Georgia pipeline's ever coming back, honestly.
And I don't know in the SEC, the way it is right now, if pipelines from other schools will happen anymore. Because you have NIL money, so if I'm a kid in Georgia and Tennessee's offering an NIL package or Georgia's offering an NIL package, even if that Georgia package is, I don't know, just throwing out numbers, a couple thousand smaller, I still might go to Georgia because they're my in-state school and they'll produce draft prospects. And really, it seems like the way it is today, you almost can't be mad as much if you lose a guy to a top SEC school in the area. Now, they got Jordan Matthews out of Baton Rouge, which is a big get, and they beat LSU for. But LSU had just fired Ed Ogeron and had no idea who they were hiring when Jordan Matthews was going through his recruitment. So you kind of have to look at it. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it as a glass half full. But if Georgia wants a kid in Georgia and Tennessee misses out, but Tennessee wants a kid in Tennessee and Georgia misses out, I feel like that's kind of like a battle you just have to deal with. Now, if for some reason Georgia ends up telling Jones he's not going to start immediately, or maybe he's not their top guy, then I could see Tennessee sneaking back up there. But even if Georgia doesn't want him, you're still competing with Ohio State and Alabama, who are two very big programs on his list.
Yeah, and the thing is, like Georgia, so David and I talked with recruiting-wise, Georgia, Ohio State, and LSU are the three, even with NIL in play, the pipeline of playing in-state still going to be, I think, way heavily, because all those schools will be able to pay those players. So I think those are the three easiest jobs in America. They're the only top dog schools in their states, and you and I can secure top 10 recruiting classes just Skyping players, honestly, if we want to.
Yeah, and if you want to throw Alabama in there, because Auburn's coaching staff is kind of in turmoil, so I don't know if you really want to even call Auburn a competitor to Alabama anymore at this point.
I put Alabama second tier only because I don't think they're almost there. They're there with the Florida States, a few other powerhouse schools. But the reason I put them a little bit below is because they're not the in-state recruiting in Alabama is not what it is in Georgia or Ohio or Louisiana. It's a little bit below. I think Alabama is still a top 5 job. Don't get me wrong. It's a top 5 job. What you're seeing right now with Alabama is if you have a coach with immediate credibility like Nick Saban had, who was a Hall of Fame coach and at one of those top 5 jobs, that's the run you get the last 15 years. And so I think that's where I am with Alabama. But I don't think that if you had a robot, for instance, just a bland robot coaching every program in America, I think Ohio State, Georgia, and LSU would be the 3 best schools. I think Alabama would probably be 4th or 5th or something like that. And then some other random school, I don't know. But yeah, but I get your point. I think, let me ask you this. Do you think because I want to give a shout out to Dave Hooker, who, even though he's not on the show today, managed to write a column that's going to provide great fodder for us to talk about, which is that the NCAA investigation was supposed to wrap up in January, and it's still ongoing. I've always been bullish on Tennessee's 2024 class because it would be the first class that they would be mostly recruiting off a massive successful year and without the cloud of the investigation. The investigation is still going on. I don't know what's delaying it. I have some thoughts, but I want to know your thoughts on, is this going to hurt Tennessee in recruiting for 2024?
I don't think so, because when you think about it, like, the violations they committed are allowed now. Like, paying players and their families is not something that's taboo anymore, which, I mean, even if you think about it, I know Tennessee fans said this too, and you're kind of like, well, yeah, but every school was paying players. It's just a matter that Tennessee got caught. And so I don't think it's that big of a deal anymore. If the NCAA punishes Tennessee for doing something that's allowed now, I would be very surprised, especially after stringing it out for this long. And realistically, if it wasn't for the fact that the NCAA randomly, and I remember they did this with Will Wade a ton, like, this, nobody talks about it, and all of a sudden the NCAA is like, yeah, we just gave you a 30-day extension on an investigation that's taking 3 years. Then all of a sudden we remember, oh yeah, Tennessee's under investigation. Because if you're a prospect on the outside looking in, like if you grew up an Alabama fan, or you're a prospect from South Florida, you probably don't know that Tennessee's under investigation because you're just not in that circle as much. So I don't think it'll matter that much unless a punishment comes down, which I think is very unlikely. But I'd like to hear what you think.
Yeah, I think it's being used against them by other coaches in recruiting. I do think that. I think other coaches are going and saying, we're still under investigation, right? I don't think it's going to hurt the 2024 class because if you ask me, again, Tennessee asked for the initial extension. The extension was given till the end of January. The NCAA never responded with the end of January. I think that's still Tennessee's fault. I think Tennessee is, what I'm reading on the inside, is that it sounds like Tennessee is fighting the NCAA on the NCAA faulting them for lack of institutional control. Tennessee's case, you're going to love this, is that because Jeremy Pruitt's wife, Casey Pruitt, was out here handing cash to players, allegedly, that she doesn't fall under the purview of Tennessee's institutional control because she wasn't an employee of the university. For the sake of recruiting, I think this could hurt if it drags into the summer. I don't think it will. I think it'll be wrapped up this month or next month. But for the sake of recruiting, I think if you're Tennessee, you take that L. You just say, look, okay, yes, there was a little bit of lack of institutional control. We moved on from everybody. We should have known the coach's wife was out here giving cash to players.
And that's another thing. Like, the administration is completely different. The coaches are completely different. So, I mean, yeah, I could see, other coaches saying, well, Tennessee, they're under investigation. You never know what they'll get hit with. But they're not. I don't think they'll get hit with anything big, for the simple fact that Tennessee gives a lot of money to the NCAA. And, people were arguing about it earlier this year, but realistically, I do think when Tennessee is good at football, it's better for college football because that's another big fan base that's drawing a lot of viewers and a lot of money towards the NCAA. And if you ban them from postseason or hit them with some crazy punishment, all of a sudden the NCAA has now lost out on a ton of money. And realistically, yes, the NCAA cares about a lot of things, but if they're not making money, then I don't think they care about anything else.
Yeah, especially with the playoff expanding to 12 teams. I mean, you don't.
And if the playoff expanding to 12 teams, I could see Tennessee consistently being in the playoff, just for the simple fact that if they, obviously, I don't know if they'll ever trump Georgia, which I should take this back now because the divisions are going away. I don't think they'll ever trump Georgia, but I think they could consistently be, 4th or 5th, maybe in the SEC, which in a 12-team playoff, they'd probably be able to sneak in or be right near it if they're not in it.
Yep. Portions of the program brought to you by Zach England, Best in Brock. Zach's got your back. Zach England can go toe-to-toe with those insurance company attorneys, and he will get you what you deserve in the Chattanooga area when it comes to personal injury. And Zach England, Best and Brock. Zach's got your back. I want to thank Caleb Jarreau for being with us on the show today in place of Dave Hooker. We wish Dave Hooker the best. He's traveling. I want to thank Ron Slay for coming on. Wish him the best. He's also traveling. And we hope to have Dave Hooker back on tomorrow. Thank you guys all for tuning in and being flexible with us on this change. And Jarreau, you have a great rest of your day.
You too as well, fellow Caleb.
All right. Have a good one, guys.